4, 3, 2.
Okay, and we are live. So for me, it does show a little bit sooner because there's a lag. So we are live for another edition of Wine and Whiskey Wednesday with the hot ninjas. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Hope you're all warm and dry if you're in snowy weather or cold weather.
It'll be interesting to see if anyone from Edmonton joins us.
Well, they should all be inside. So you would think so. They're not going to be outside. Yeah, it certainly is a little bit crazy weather out there. But yeah, so everyone have a good week. I think we are.
So far.
We're so far. Okay. I think we're live here as well.
It's been a spectacular week so far.
Oh, I like that.
Any better, and I couldn't stand it.
Okay.
Really?
Cool. Very cool.
I'm not sure if that's like
if that's
the
good
way
or
you
bad.
said it. It's like, is that true or are you being sarcastic?
It is absolutely true. Every
that's
week of my
exciting.
life is so amazing. People wouldn't believe it.
I love it.
And so that's why I don't bother talking about it, because nobody would believe it anyway.
No, Steve actually is a firm believer in saying positive things and believing positive things, and then manifest itself. And so when we go to a restaurant, and you know how the waiter or the waitress will make small talk, and how are you this evening? And he will respond, I am spectacular. I couldn't imagine it being any better. And they just kind of look at him like, okay.
What are you on?
And I'll have what he's having.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Suzanne, how are you?
Hi, Suzanne. But you got to admit, our service is always good.
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the time it's good. Yeah. Not all the time. Okay, so we have a special guest with us this evening, and you're all special. So Melanie, I'm getting your internet connection is unstable again.
Me?
No, mine.
Oh.
I would just be glad that it's your internet connection that's unstable and not yourself.
I already have an unstable husband, so I don't really have another unstable. So I'm going to turn off my iPad so that I'm not draining internet on that as well. But okay, so our guest tonight is Melanie Schroeder. And hey, Brad, you're not online.
Uh-oh.
Brad is always online. Come on online, Brad.
Come on, Brad.
And so, okay, let's try this for the third time. So our guest tonight is Melanie Schroeder. If you joined us last week, or if you watched our Wine and Whiskey Wednesday last week, our topic was goal setting. And so even though a lot of people set goals, a lot of people struggle to meet those goals and find the time to make those goals. So I thought it would be a perfect segue into a topic that Melanie is very passionate about. I heard Melanie speak at QB Connect in Toronto this last December, and she spoke about boundaries and setting boundaries. And Melanie comes from, and I'm going to give you a couple minutes to talk about yourself, and you tell us a little bit about your story. But Melanie comes from a background of accounting, like many of us. She is a CPA, but also has ventured into a coaching and counseling side of her business as well. So I'm going to let Melanie, and you are muted, if you can unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about how, I mean, that's such an unusual combination. So do tell us a little bit about how you made that leap, and whatever else you'd like to share.
Thanks, Juliet. It's like one of the first questions almost I get when people find out that I am also a registered professional counselor. They're like, how do those two things go together, and how did you do that? Basically, I had a midlife crisis when I was about 40, and my kids were grown up and they had left home, and I was like, what do I do now? I can do anything I want. And then I was like, what do I want to do? I have no idea. But when I was 18 or 19 and going into college, university, I had two choices, counseling and accounting. And I chose accounting, obviously. So when I was deciding what I wanted to do after the kids left, I thought, well, I'm going to go back and do what I wanted, the other thing I wanted to do. And so I went and got a professional counseling diploma. And now I'm sort of integrating the two.
Can you tell me how that works? Like, what do you mean by integrating the two? So in a typical accounting engagement, you would look after their books, you'd look after advisory, consulting. How do you, so you provide coaching as well to business owners, or is it coaching to accounting professionals? Who is your coaching client?
Yeah, it looks a little bit differently with every client. The natural progression is really to coach from the numbers and to be able to offer a little bit deeper coaching. And so one of my favorite things is to really get to provide a holistic experience and a functional experience, which I carry over from kind of the medical standpoint, where you look at root causes of problems as opposed to just putting band-aids on things or medicating symptoms. So that's what I do with businesses. And that is look at like the root cause of what's going on. So a lot of it will come down to mindset, and that's where I can pull in counseling. So if we need to change beliefs and we need to look at maybe traumas that happened in childhood in order to change beliefs, I can do that very gently. Yeah.
That's interesting. Very interesting combination of service offering. It's certainly niche.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that there will be many people even across Canada that can say that they could do a combination of both. So absolutely. Okay. So one of the first things I want to start with is maybe if you can provide, so as I said, we're talking about boundaries. Can you provide maybe a definition or some guidelines as to what you mean by boundaries so that we're all talking about the same thing?
Yeah. I really love Brene Brown's definition of boundaries because it's so simple, and it literally is just what is okay with me and what's not okay. So that's simply it. A boundary is what's okay with me and what's not okay. And then the other side to that is being able to communicate that in a way that people can understand, because that's the part that I think we really end up not doing very well is having those boundaries, but then we don't communicate them, and then we have expectations that people will respect them and we feel taken advantage of, but when we haven't really communicated them very clearly.
Okay, so Steve's going to stay really silent here because that never happens with me. So
No,
right, it never happens with me at all.
No, I know.
Sometimes it's not a good thing that, your husband or your partner is on the same call. Okay. So one of the things
did you say something? Sorry.
No, I didn't say anything, nothing at all. One of the statements that that Melanie, you say all the time, or that you ask, is, what are you here to do? And I love that. So that is a question that you ask your clients when you're starting with them. How do you incorporate that statement into what it is you do?
I think it's not actually, and it's an interesting question because I've never really thought about incorporating it formally into the work I do, but it's more just something I ask in a lot of the conversations, like, what is it that you want out of what you're doing? Because to me, we're supposed to be happy. Like that's the whole reason we do what we do, is to get some sort of need met. So I know that in order for my clients to be satisfied and to find value in what I'm doing, they need to feel like their needs are being met. And so that all stems from them feeling satisfied. And it's a purpose-driven life, right? Like Viktor Frankl talks about people feeling depressed when they're not expressing or finding meaning in their life. So that's where I get that from.
And so do you find that, so if you ask the question, what are you here to do? You're really looking for what their purpose is, what their purpose is of their business or of their life. And so is that kind of what you would use as you know, their North Star, or we call it a North Star, or your guiding principle for being able to establish what these boundaries need to be.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and it's not even what's your purpose, but really how do you derive meaning out of your life? And we use that word purpose when really it's how do we derive meaning? And it's not necessarily one purpose. Some people have like this one guiding purpose and they feel really clear about it. But a lot of people just might derive meaning from, let's say, their family relationships. And so even in a business, what they're here to do is provide for their family. And they use their business as a tool to do that. So you might go in and try to say, hey, what are your goals for your business? And they can't really come up with any because how they're deriving meaning is providing for their family. But if you frame it in the way, you know, well, what you're here to do is provide for your family. So what's the best way to do that? Well, it's to make X number of dollars in the business. Okay, great. Now, how can we also drive boundaries in the business to make sure that what you're here to do also gets met, which is to spend time with your family?
Okay, very cool. Okay, so Christian posted in the chat that Brené Brown says clear is kind.
Yes.
Which is a very common quote that circulates. And welcome Afsana, Bianca, and I think Christian came and went. He said it's dinner time. He'll check it out after dinner.
Nice.
And Brad is in listen mode only this week. So welcome everyone.
Hello, Brad. And everybody else.
Yes, absolutely. So when people are looking to start setting boundaries and making time for themselves, what do you recommend? So there's obviously personal boundaries and there's professional boundaries. Do you recommend starting with one over the other?
No, I think it's really where you're feeling the most pain. So it's going to be very individual where you want to start. And really how you do anything is how you do everything. So typically if you're having a boundaries issue, and this is one of the places that I require a lot of work. So it's why I love it so much because talking about it helps me work on it all the time. And so in that sense, it doesn't really matter where you start working on it, because if you work on it in your personal life, it's going to naturally improve in your business life. Okay. So it will flow through, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you have some questions that you would ask maybe to help someone determine where to start?
Yeah, I really like to ask people like what's not working and what's causing you the most frustration and the most pain, and where you'll typically see it in a business is around not charging enough. So people are working too much and they feel they're being undervalued. So anytime you hear somebody starting to talk about, oh, I'm not getting paid enough, or this person doesn't appreciate me, or I never have enough time to spend with my family, I'm being taken advantage of, I'm getting frustrated. Like those are all kind of key words that when I hear them, I know that there are some issues around boundaries with their clients, but with themselves first and with ourselves. Because if we decided that we were going to put ourselves first, we wouldn't even do that with our clients.
Okay. I'm kind of monopolizing the conversation. So if anyone has any other questions, feel free to jump in as well.
And I'm curious how this is for everyone else. Like Jacqueline and Suzanne, how has this been for you guys in your practices?
I think for me, it's been a learning thing. So it's definitely not, I've gone through like cycles of it, I guess. So there was a time where I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I can't believe people hire me, to, oh my word, people are totally taking advantage of me. Oh my goodness. Like, and it went through like these bad, like, you know, and then it went to, oh my, like, and it got to a point almost where I resented clients, but yet they were my bread, like they were the ones that paid me, but I resented them because I was angry that they didn't fully appreciate my value. But and it was ridiculous, and then it got to ridiculousness, and then so it's gone through over the last 10 years. It's been up and down, but right now I find it good. I find the balance is good, and I find I did raise my prices and it felt awful. And
Yeah.
actually, I remember I actually shut my computer off after I did it because I got a couple feedbacks. It's the first time I did it, and I had to like put in a minimum fee and I had to do all those things. And I did end up losing, I think, 2 clients, but like the other 15 were fine. And those 2 clients were trouble clients anyway. But it was really, really hard, and I felt awful. And it was a really hard thing to do. But then in the end, now the relationship's more, you know, I feel they're giving me what I value, and then I want to give them what I value. So it's a more equal relationship, I guess. But it's definitely not been, it's something I've had to work at.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I
Jacqueline.
would say I've had the same experience.
Yeah. And I think we all have. I mean, I think raising prices for the first time is tough because we have learned through all, and I think with the I'm not going to say invention of all these Facebook groups, but with the prevalence of all the Facebook groups, you now hear people telling you, well, no, you need to be raising your prices and you need to value what you do. But before that, you never heard that from anywhere. So you had to find it within yourself to think, well, I'm being undervalued, so I should probably raise my prices. And that's a tough conversation, and you typically don't have yourself. So I think you are seeing it more as well.
And it also swings to, like, sometimes the Facebook groups are like, oh, drop the client. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, it's like, wait a second here. There's 18 steps before you got to get to that one. It's like, they said something mean, drop the client. It's like kids on a playground where, you know, he was mean to me. I'm never going to go to your birthday party again. Like, it's this juvenile. So, like, I find that groups are swinging back and forth too to these such extremes. And they don't appreciate, you need to leave. Oh, okay, but maybe they have value. Maybe what they're saying, there's points there. Maybe you are doing something. Maybe there's other ways to, like, you know, try to mend before you end. What was that? Marley, I think, in a movie. I
like that.
I think part of that as well, though, is just like everything else on social media, it's really easy to sit behind a computer and give advice that impacts somebody else's livelihood on the other side of the country. And maybe, you know, they need the clients to pay, you know, put groceries on the table, and you're not really being helpful by saying, well, you know, fire the client.
Yeah.
So,
like,
but
maybe they only have 5 clients, and that's 1/5 of their income. So maybe there's other ways to, anyways.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find too, like, there's been a swing to sort of get rid of toxic people in your life. And so there's an assumption as soon as you don't feel valued that it's the other person's fault, that they're not valuing you, when that is not necessarily true. If you're not respecting your own boundaries about what you're willing to do and not willing to do, and not communicating them in a kind, clear and kind way, then how are other people going to know? Like they really, in fact, might be kind of shocked and feel hurt that we haven't let them know how deeply we're being affected by what's going on. So it's easy to say, oh yeah, that person is negative and they're taking advantage of us and we need to cut that toxic person out of our life. And yet they might actually not be a toxic person. So giving people the benefit of the doubt and checking it out, like not making assumptions, which is another big part of that communication, is a big part of it. And then, you know, giving them the opportunity to step up and say, okay, like I'm really super busy and I need to raise my prices. And then some people will be like, great, what you do is more than worth it. And other people will be like, nope, it's not worth it. And they'll go. And that's okay, because the 18, you know, out of the 18, if 16 clients stay and you raise your prices, you've more than made up for the 2 clients that left, and probably have greater revenue and more time to do what you're doing in.
And you feel valued by the people.
And you feel valued.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can't put a price tag on that.
No.
I think that's a great point, though. I think, you know, I think if we believe that people are generally good, then, you know, most people, I think, would be exactly what Melanie said. They would be upset if they knew, you know, that you what was happening to you because you weren't charging them enough money for your services. But we do have, I don't know why it is so easy to undervalue ourselves and so difficult to ask for what we are actually worth.
Well, you've just nailed it right on the head, I think. And it's one of my little bugaboos that I want to change the languaging around, is that we say, charge what you're worth, charge what you're worth. Let's charge what we're worth. But it's not what we're worth, because we are priceless. It's what is the work worth, and what is that work worth to somebody else? And so language is so important, because our subconscious brain listens to that language. And so we automatically will think, if that person isn't willing to charge it, then we're not worth it, when that's really not what it's about at all. It's just, this client doesn't want to pay that amount for that service. It has nothing to do with how much value I have or how much value I provide even. It's just that that person doesn't find the same value in that service.
Yep.
And if you can step outside of yourself and look at it from that objective perspective, there's no hurt involved. There's no reason to be upset. There's no reason to think anything about it at all, other than it's just a business transaction, and you can go find a client that does value it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That just sounds way too logical.
Where's the resentment? Where is the anger in that?
I know.
Where's the pettiness? I can't listen to this. It's too
I know.
Logical.
I know. That is the root of cognitive therapy.
I have always taken it so personally.
Me too.
It moves on, or I did a proposal and then they didn't accept the proposal, which is why Steve does the sales now, because I take it all so personally. And that is just so logical, to separate the value that I have from the value of the service provided on the proposal.
Yeah.
I have a client that's in the process. This is our last month. We'll be done with them in 2 weeks. And I started with him 10 years ago. And I mean, I would do groceries and then I'd go to his place and write check. It is so absolutely makes sense that he's like, it's not worth it anymore for what you're, because I've completely decreased what I've done, because when I had him, he was one of my very first clients. So he's right. The value of what I gave then, when he was like my, 2 out of my 3 clients, like it was complete. I had my kid in the car and I go running and deliver checks and like, so totally, completely get what he's talking about. And I am getting like, it's almost ridiculous. I found out, I didn't even know with WagePoint that we got a little bit less of a fee if your client, I wasn't paying any attention. And then I'm like, oh, look at that. Now he's leaving. He's gonna have to pay $5 more for a thing. And I'm like, Suzanne, grow up. And it's like, how petty can you get? Haha, now you have to pay $5. Didn't count that in my fee, did you? And I was like, what is wrong with me? It's bad. And
I do that too. Yeah, I do that too. Because we're human, right? And our brains want to keep us safe. And so I think we talked about this last week. Like we are on the lookout for anything that could hurt us. And especially some people more than others, but especially if you've had like a significant amount of challenges in your life, your brain will be even more hypervigilant. And so, we just have to be kind to ourselves. That's my daily mantra. I like have it written everywhere. I have to like, I mean, yeah, do any of you watch Grey's Anatomy?
Yes, I do.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Okay, I'll leave now.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Sometimes you watch it with me, Steve.
Yeah. Well, I often talk about the dark, twisty place. I'm kind of sad that Meredith isn't really there anymore, because I really identified with her when she was. I was like, that's me.
Yeah.
But sometimes we just have to work a little bit harder to remind ourselves that life can be objective and logical, and that our emotions are just biofeedback.
Absolutely.
It really, it's so logical that it's just astounding that I've never thought of it that way before.
Yeah.
So Afsana posted in the chat that one time when she built up the courage and she raised her price with a client, even though they accepted it with no objection, she felt odd about it for a while. So
Probably
again, I guess that
because-
comes back to how we're internalizing it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And she probably didn't raise, Oksana, you didn't raise it enough then. Like if the client is not objecting, you've left money on the table, guaranteed.
Absolutely.
And I'm one of the worst offenders, okay? Like, don't think that I'm like, oh, I have it all together. I'm like charging all of this money. Like, I like things easy. And so I'm happy to leave money on the table so I do not have to work hard to sell my services. But I'm also happy with what I'm charging. I feel valued. So like I found a nice in-between point. But I have some clients who are like, I'm not paying you that amount. I'm going to pay you more. I'm like, okay, whatever. You can pay me more. That's fine.
I don't think we have any clients that have ever said that to us.
No, I always find one of the worst in the sales process, one of the worst feelings for me is when they say yes too quickly.
Yeah.
They immediately know that price was too good.
Yes.
No
like, man.
pushback, nothing.
I did that 2 months ago. I made this big quote. I was so nervous, and I waited a day because I'm like, oh, it's so much money. No, I'm just gonna do it. And she came back in like 20 minutes, and yeah, oh, really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I was like, shoot.
Yeah, I know. It's, I posted this today on Instagram, but we did these calendars. I know it's backwards, but we did these calendars in San Jose where we got to like pick each month with a saying and then put them all together. I don't know if
Oh, I didn't see
Stephen-
that.
Yeah, it had this like whole little station where you could make the calendars, and so every
that's
month has a little thing. And this month I've really been working on like not caring what other people think. So, and I just found this in my drawer today, and it says, keep moving forward. And it's a quote by Johnny Depp that says, just keep moving forward and don't give a damn about what anybody thinks.
Perfect.
You just
Yeah,
keep
that
showing
sounds
up.
like- yeah, it sounds like Johnny Depp.
Right? Just keep showing up and doing the hard stuff, and it all
Absolutely.
gets easier. But if you
Yeah.
keep doing the hard stuff, everything you do gets progressively more complex. So
Do you find when you're working with clients, Melanie, that often do you need to get into what their why is?
like their why of why they're doing things, like what's important
Like
to them.
you have to often get down that deep, I guess.
I guess you're talking in terms of like what's motivating them and pulling them towards a goal. I don't typically. I have a little bit different viewpoint in terms of coaching, and maybe that's because I work more on mindset. But typically I like people to have goals that are going to pull them forward intrinsically, as opposed to needing to like really nail down their why. I don't know. Most people maybe come to me with that. It doesn't sound like something I've really had to work really hard on, but we do. But I do. It's more around like what the question I guess I ask is, what would you walk over broken glass for? And it's not always. Again, it's that what's your purpose? Why are you doing things? It's not always why did you start your business? Like, oh, I want to, make $1 million. It could be like mine is I want everyone to know how special and unique they are. And then whatever business I'm doing, that's just my focus.
Right.
Or if I'm out in my everyday life, that's what I'm looking to make sure happens in interactions I have with people. So it's just a little bit different focus, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah. And Matthew has joined us online as well. Matthew is
Yay!
a regular. Matthew, aren't you in India or on your way to India?
He's going to India?
Yeah, he was. I'm sure he said that he was getting ready to go. So I think he was leaving today. So maybe.
Well, maybe
and is connected.
Maybe it takes him a long time to pack. Maybe he's still packing.
Maybe. Well, welcome, Matthew. Okay, so one of the things we want to talk about is boundaries. And we kind of touched on it a little bit, but I'd like to do a little bit of a deeper dive in some of the topics that you covered at QB Connect, where you actually talked about, how to set boundaries and where you know that someone is crossing a boundary or a boundary that you've got. So can you share a little bit about that with us?
So where to set boundaries, like where are good places to do that in your business?
Or even how do you know that someone is crossing your boundaries? Maybe we'll start there. How do you know that someone is crossing a boundary if you haven't formally said, this is my boundary?
Okay, well, let me ask you a question, Juliet. This is what I'd like to do. How do you know when someone is crossing your boundaries? Do you feel it in your body?
I guess I feel uncomfortable.
Can you maybe
Or
describe that
angry.
a little?
Usually
angry.
I feel
She's
angry.
looking right now.
Yeah, is she looking at Steve? Are you looking at Steve? let's
I guess
paint a
I guess
scenario.
I feel angry. I would feel anger more than,
Angry.
I think that would be my first emotion.
Well, and how does anger feel for you? Can you maybe describe it a little bit more? Like, does it have an internal feeling? Where would you feel it in your body?
I have no idea.
I am really enjoying this. Thank you, Mom.
I'm really putting her on the spot.
Yeah,
she's never inviting me back ever.
Yeah,
Well, she hates talking about herself. So
and about herself and feelings.
And
I mean,
feelings,
and if nothing comes to mind, you like, that's cool too. You can just be like, I don't feel it in my body. There's no wrong answer. It's just,
and I'm not sure that I can pinpoint on where it would be, but I do know that if a boundary is crossed, it's typically anger that I would feel, not sadness or it would be anger, I think.
That's fair. And the reason I asked is because it is different for everybody, right? So I can't say how it would feel for people because it's very individual. I get anxious. So how I define it is different for me, but everybody will know how it is for them. Mm-hmm. So something that's really important when it comes down to things like this is becoming very self-aware and starting to think about, okay, I'm having a reaction. How you'll know is you have a reaction of some kind in relationship to an event. Mm-hmm. So something happens, you have a reaction, an emotional reaction, and then you will do something about it. I don't know what it is, but and then we have that loop that I've talked about. I don't think I talked about it in Toronto, but it's this biofeedback loop that I talk about that is the basis of the cognitive behavioral therapy, which is thoughts lead to feelings, which lead to actions, and then it just goes around in a big circle. So the great thing about that is you can actually interrupt that cycle at any location. So for me, when I started this journey, I was not very good at identifying my feelings. So like I didn't have feelings. If anybody had asked me, they were like, what are you feeling? I'm like, well, I don't feel things. I don't cry and I don't have feelings. So, but I could tell them what was happening. And so, you can kind of go in there or I could tell them the thoughts I was having. Yeah. So you really can take any one of those spots and sort of say, okay, well, when this happens, I have these thoughts. Okay. And then start to analyze what's going on. So if a client, a really great example really is scope creep. And for people who don't know what that term means, it just means that you're doing work that isn't in your original engagement letter. So for me, I might have an engagement that's like a personal tax return, a T1 in April. And then they call me up and they say, hey, can you tell me how much I need to, or I should contribute to my RRSP in order to maximize my refund? Well, that is not part of my normal T1 engagement. So that's additional work. But it doesn't take me too long. And maybe I like the client and maybe it's only a 5-minute phone call to talk to them about it. There might be all sorts of reasons. Maybe it's going to take me longer to do the stupid engagement letter revision than I feel like it would be to do the whole thing. So, but you multiply that by 80 clients and I'm missing out on maybe like, $8,000 of revenue. I don't know, like, who knows, or $800 of revenue. Yeah. I can't do math in my head at this time of day and a glass of wine.
You're missing out on some revenue.
I'm missing out on revenue. It's not good. And it's April, or not April, it's February. And so I'm busy doing T4s and T5s and trying to get all that stuff done. So I don't have time. And I start to get angry. So I might then stop and say, okay, well, what am I thinking when that happens? So a client calls me up and says, can you just do this? It will only take 5 minutes. Yeah. There's going to be a thought process that goes on in my head in response to that event. And for me, I'm going to Brene Brown here and be vulnerable. For me, it's going to be something like, well, if I don't do this, there's a chance that I could lose the client. Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to miss out on the revenue. Or if I don't do this, they might not like me. Or if, pick your poison, right? It's all going to be related to abandonment. Those are my issues. So those are the thoughts. It's going to lead to me feeling anxious or afraid. And then I'm going to do the work because I don't want to have that. I'm more afraid of having that fear than I am of the scope creep. And then that leads to me feeling resentful and angry. And then I blame the client instead of myself for not having good boundaries.
Okay. So you've identified that a boundary is being crossed.
Yeah.
You've identified what it is that's happening that is crossing the boundary. How do you have a conversation about establishing that you have a boundary so it doesn't get crossed?
So the good news here is that you can actually do multiple things. Like maybe you're not ready to start having conversations with your clients, and to say, hey, I'm going to have to bill you for that. You can, or maybe you want an in-between. Like Lisa was just telling me, and I've done this as well, about how she's used her calendar to set her Calendly link to separate that a little bit. And you can put in your link, like if you're getting a lot of requests like that, I could put in my Calendly link and I get a call. I could say, hey, if you want to do that, you have to go and schedule that appointment. And in my Calendly link, I could have the price of that consultation right in my Calendly link. Okay. So that it shows that. So if you're really unsure of yourself in having that conversation, which is what it would be. Like if a client called me up and said, hey, can you do this for me? The best thing would be for me to just say right then, sure, that's outside of the scope of your engagement. It's going to cost you this much to do it. Did you still want to go ahead? Clear but kind, or clear as kind, right? Like that's the best thing. And then the client says yes or no or whatever. But if you can't quite get there or don't feel comfortable having that conversation, there are ways that you can achieve the same thing by utilizing all our great technology.
Well, and that's a great way of it not being confrontational, which is what a lot of people are uncomfortable with, of being able to, but still be valued for the extra service, and then not resenting the client for not being able to charge them, even though it's because of you that they're not being charged. But no, I love that. I love that as an idea. So that was Calendly. Oh, and my dad has joined. Hey, Dad. Dad's learning about boundaries. Okay, so no personal questions anymore, right? Because my dad is online.
No personal questions.
So,
but a great chance to practice your boundaries because you never have to answer them.
But okay, so Calendly, I think Acuity is a scheduler and does that as well.
Yeah.
That allows you have to be on the paid version. The free version, I don't believe will let you assign payment with it, and it gets you to also collect the payment to streamline the whole process. So
that's right.
So no, that's a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Any other questions as I'm kind of
Can you
plugging the whole conversation?
maybe just take a couple of minutes and explain for people who perhaps don't use a tool like Calendly, just, maybe what it is and how you would use that? Because I think that's a really helpful tip for a lot of people, right? Because it's unfortunate, but there are a lot of people in our industry who suffer from undervaluing and undercharging and avoiding price discussions and all
And
of
not
the
wanting to be
above.
confrontational.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a great tool and a great way of being able to deal with that. And it's a very easy tool to use.
Mhm.
Maybe if we just took a couple of minutes to just, exactly how you would do that might help some people out there.
Yeah, and definitely, I don't know, Lisa's not on the call, is she? Like, we were looking at this earlier, and I know that she's set this up. And I set it up a while ago as well. Not because of the price issue, but I was having the problem where I couldn't keep boundaries with myself about not working enough and booking too many appointments back to back. So I would be working all day, and I would let clients book in appointments whenever they wanted. Like, I couldn't say no to a client. They'd call and they'd be like, when can I have an appointment? I'd be like, whenever you want. Here's a link to my calendar. And I had left my calendar open all the time. So I'd open up my calendar and I would see these appointments and I'm like, oh, I don't have time to eat lunch or go to the bathroom. How is that even helpful to me at all? So that was the challenge I was having and why I set it up. So that kind of sidestepped me having to say no, which was the hardest thing that I was having. And then it's allowed me to start practicing saying no. And I'll tell you what, even just the act of restricting my calendar in that stupid calendar app was difficult. I was like, but if I do this, they won't be able to book. What if they can't book appointments with me? And then I won't have any clients and they'll just leave me, but it doesn't happen. And so so Calendly or Acuity, which I use, you can log into the settings, and I think it might be worth doing a session where you actually can dig into all the settings, because what ends up happening is you set up different appointment types, and within each appointment type you can set an amount for that appointment, and you can even set up a payment requirement or not. Like, even just putting the amount for that appointment will trigger that person has to pay for it, and then you can issue them a receipt later if you want to, if you don't want to take payment through the calendar app. And then in terms of the time, you can set restrictions on when those people can book that appointment. So how I started doing it, I was working with my coach, Madeline Pratt, and she had me do this. So she was like, well, when do you want to be doing discovery calls with clients? And I was like, well, really only once or twice a week for this very small window of time. And she's like, well, put that into your calendar then. Don't just leave it open, because people will book them whenever they want to. So you can do that and then have that link on your website or wherever you want. But you can also create links that are private that you can send to a client that maybe you want a little bit greater window and a more open calendar. So it's quite flexible.
I think that one of the great things about it as well is by restricting your calendar with a potential client, for example, it also shows scarcity. Oh, she's not free until Thursday of next week. She's booked solid.
Yeah.
I better put that in now and make sure I don't miss that appointment.
Yeah.
So it can serve another purpose as well.
Yeah. I really I had a prospective client, and I thought for sure that she would just give up and not not want to work with me. She was doing this discovery call, and I had restricted the new client discovery calls these 15-minute slots only twice a week for a very small window of time. And she had to wait a month for an appointment.
Good for you.
And she did.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's good.
So it can be a good thing that you set boundaries for yourself. There's other side effects to it as well. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's just recap because there was a lot of stuff in that.
Yeah.
So Calendly and Acuity are the two big players that are out there.
Yeah.
That are scheduling apps that let you restrict your calendar as to when people can book appointments with you, so you can set boundaries that way. It also allows you, and it is the paid version. I think it's the paid version of both, right? I know it is
Yes.
Calendly because that's
Yeah.
what we. So on the paid version of both of those versions, you can also put in an amount that's associated with someone trying to book that meeting. So that if you're not comfortable letting someone know that it's outside of the scope and that there's a charge associated with it, send them a link to your calendar, say book a time for my on my calendar, and then they will get the notification as to what that that charge is. Perfect.
Yeah. I think Microsoft Bookings does it as well, like the native booking app, if you subscribe to Microsoft Office 365.
Okay, good to know. Excellent.
Yeah.
And so Brad, okay, so I'm just catching up on the chat messages here. So Linda said, if you're tracking your time spent on a client, okay, so this is going back a little bit in our conversation, take the total time spent for that client, divided into the fee charged, and are you getting an hourly amount that you'd like to get for that work?
Yes, we talked about that in the Practical Application Lab in Toronto. So it's good to look at that on a monthly basis and make sure that you are not going below your the monthly rate or the hourly rate that you need to meet your income goals for the year.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then Matthew, okay, so Matthew doesn't leave till next week on Tuesday, but he's driving in traffic. And Brad Salmanes, Acuity and Zoom have changed his life. And yes, that is the other thing that you can do. And it's something that I do as well. When someone books an appointment with me through Calendly, when they get the confirmation, they also get my Zoom link. So that's one less step that I have to do as well.
Yeah.
And Calendly, actually, I think Steve introduced me to this because
So
I think you actually tried to. I'm sorry.
It's my fault.
No, it's your
fault.
It was awesome. So Calendly Gmail has a Calendly plugin.
Yeah.
That actually, because he was having some challenges with some people who couldn't necessarily follow the Calendly link and figure out how to book an appointment. And so with the app or the add-on in Gmail, you actually have the ability to embed the dates and times in the email. And all they have to do is click on the date or time in the grid in the email to accept and book an appointment, which is awesome. And I think it also narrows down when you want to book the appointment with them. So you get to say, well, I'd like to meet you on Monday or Thursday. And then you send them times and dates for Monday and Thursday, as opposed to sending them your link and then they just pick whatever they want. So
you can select up to 3 days.
Yeah.
And that's in Gmail?
Yeah.
Calendly and Gmail. Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay. Well, that's cool.
It's an add-in, add-on.
And
I'm sure that if they have it for.
Yeah, for those that are, as Juliet said, are a little technology challenged, who really just want to have a phone call and don't want to make an appointment, just call me now.
Yeah.
That really helped them because all they do now is, they see 11 a.m. on Tuesday the 3rd. They just click on that and the appointment's made. All the reminders go. So that's been very helpful.
Nice. I'll have to check that out to see if they have one for Acuity. Probably.
Yeah, but it looks kind of slick too. I had a couple people ask me, how did you get that in the middle of your email?
Yeah.
So, okay, cool.
I think like one of the key things is always like start how you mean to go on. I can't even remember where I first heard that, but it's been like a lifesaver to me in terms of relationships, because fixing boundaries that you've let slide is way harder than just starting out with, how you want to be treated right from the get-go. So like good engagement letters, good, I think it was Brian Clare in the session in Toronto talked about rules of engagement, sort of like a code of conduct. Like I'm still thinking about that, and I think that's an amazing idea because I don't think anybody reads my engagement letter. It's like some legal form that's required by CPA BC, and I mean, you know, they have to sign it, but like just a nice little one page, here's what's expected, would be amazing.
Okay, so any recommendations or starting places that you can give to our audience for scenarios where the boundaries have already been crossed and they've now watched our session, our episode, and have said, okay, I need to establish some boundaries here. What is the best way for them to start with existing relationships, whether they're personal or professional?
I think the best thing is to figure out what is okay with you and what's not okay. So determine what your boundaries are, and then really learn a good way to communicate them. So make sure you're not angry, and start to communicate them in a clear and kind way. But knowing what they are is the most important piece, because if you don't know what they are, then you can't communicate them. And to do that when you're angry is not really a good headspace to do that in. So and that's easier, trust me, I know, easier said than done. Because, you know, that's typically when we're thinking about it is when we're angry. But if you just give yourself some space to be angry, feel angry, and that's the best time to actually get at what the boundary is that's being crossed. Write it down, write out all your thoughts, write out all your feelings. And then when you're feeling more calm, say, okay, now what am I going to do about this, and how am I going to approach it, and what's the solution to it? So great time to figure out what it is when you're upset, and then when you're calm, then you deal with it.
Yeah, that's great advice. And you know, you're absolutely right. And Afsana said this in the chat as well, that it's so hard to get it back once the boundary has been crossed. It's hard to bring it back. But I do love that advice, that and especially with people, you know, who are watching this and are going to be more aware of it with, again, personal relationships, professional relationships, rather than trying to deal with it when you know that the boundaries being crossed, is put it aside, document it, because we're all good at documenting, right, and processes.
Right. Yeah.
And then deal with it afterwards, but at least acknowledge that you recognize that a boundary has been crossed.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Any other suggestions? So for example, you know, a scenario that you have clients who are calling you, well, I need this right now, and you're working on other client work. Anything that you could recommend? Because that is them trying to cross a boundary, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's always okay for them to ask, because maybe you're not doing anything.
Right.
So I don't put any sort of judgment on them asking. The first ask is always, you know, I think, okay. So because maybe they do feel like they need it right now. And then I try to say to people, well, if I can't do it, I'll say, you know, that's great, or whatever. That's great. You need it right now. And I'm sorry, I'm not able to get to this. I try not to say I'm sorry, but it's still definitely part of my vocabulary. I will, however, be able to get to it at this time. You know, if it's something that you need right away, can we talk about a way to meet your need? Because people get upset when their needs aren't being met. And so if these people are my clients, I want their needs to be met, and I want my needs to be met. So I'm always looking for the win-win situation. And if somebody's calling me with, I need this right now, I know that what I need to deal with is how they're feeling, not what they think they want. And so I'm going to look to try to assuage how they're feeling as opposed to what it is they think they need.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I really like that.
And it's actually, that's taken from, if people want a resource, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. So you can buy that book and read it, and it really starts looking at how to use your communication in a way that makes things very objective and looks at communication from meeting a needs basis. So when people are talking to you and they're really upset, it's because their needs aren't being met. And so how can I try to stay calm and just figure out what need you have that needs to be met? And then if I'm invested in the relationship, I might want to try to meet that need. I mean, if you're not invested in the relationship, you can be like, hey, you know, let's talk about this when you calm down, or let's not talk anymore at all. Bye. Right? Like, you know, it takes a lot of energy and effort to deal with this stuff sometimes. So
it does. So you want to make sure that it is in relationships that you want to be invested in. Can
That's
you
right.
repeat the name of that book? It was Nonviolent Communication.
Communication. Yeah.
And who was the author?
Marshall Rosenberg, I think is his name, but it's definitely Nonviolent Communication. It's very popular, well known. So if that's not the right author name, you'll get it.
Okay. I'll have a look, and then I'll post it in the chat below. And then you mentioned Brené Brown at the beginning, and I know you're a big Brené Brown fan.
She's
If
amazing.
someone was to start with a book, which one would you recommend of hers?
Oh,
they only have one. You have to start them with one.
Oh man.
They don't know what to read. What would you start them with?
I probably would start with Daring Greatly.
Okay. I don't think we have that one.
Oh, what? I'm
Yes,
just kidding.
We have
Okay.
Dare to Lead. Do we have that one? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I've read that one then.
There's Daring Greatly I really liked, and there was, I think, one right before that I think Daring Greatly is one of my favorites. Well, it's definitely one of my favorites, but yeah.
Yeah, one of the great challenges in the world is that there are just far too many books to read.
Oh, aren't there? People just can't go wrong reading Brené Brown, though. I think it should be like mandatory learning in school. I mean, she covers all of the things. If you could learn all you need to know about the origins of shame and how to counteract that, there would be a lot more happy people in the world, and the world would be a much better place.
Matthew, welcome.
Great stuff, by the way. Loved it. Was listening the whole way home. Really, really good stuff.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got about 3 minutes left. And just as a completely unrelated, we were talking about books and how there is not enough time to read books. So Steve, why don't you tell everybody about Blinkist?
Oh yeah, Blinkist. It is, I guess, an app for those who do not know, where you can get I forget how much the subscription was, but it certainly wasn't expensive. And what you have is you have access to summaries of books. So, for example, what I do is, because I hear about books all the time, and I know that unless I never worked and never slept, I'm never going to have time to read them all. But maybe I do want to read it. So I use Blinkist as a filter. And it's about a 10 to 15 minute summary of the book. You can either read the summary or you can also listen to it. It's all audio. And if after I have read the summary, I think, yeah, there may be something in this book I need to dig deeper, I will then get the book.
Nice.
But there's lots of books where for me anyway, just getting the summary and the main points from the book was all I needed to do. So it's a great app. I mean, I use it almost every day. So highly recommended if you like reading. And if you're trying to figure out, which books you actually want to dedicate your time, to reading.
And what I found interesting, because Steve is very much like me, where we're control freaks. And so the first thing he did was he actually downloaded the summaries for books that he'd already read to see how good the summaries and the audio summaries were, before relying on them with other books.
Trust but verify.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think is awesome.
Love it.
Okay, so we're at 9 o'clock.
Okay, can I get to our quote? Can I get to our
Sure.
quote?
Yes.
Okay, because
Go ahead. I'll let you end off. Steve.
oh, you're too kind. Thank you. I actually changed the quote that I was going to share based upon tonight.
Okay.
So hopefully it's appropriate. So the quote that I decided to go with is, care about what other people think and you will always be their prisoner.
Ooh.
That's a good one.
That strikes home.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of a quote freak, but that one I liked. So anyway, I'm ending it, I guess. So thank you very, very much, Melanie. It's been great having you as a guest. You did a great job. Lots of great information. So hopefully we don't have too many people in the audience in overload, but it was really great. Thank you. I guess we had a number of people who did download our free workbook from our website. Hope you're enjoying it. I think Jacqueline, I think you grabbed a copy of it. I hope you found it.
I'm still going through it.
Awesome. Well, I think it's what, 26 pages or something crazy?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
But it
So
makes you
anyway,
think.
Good. So anyone else out there, if you're looking for just a tool to help you set your goals, please grab a copy. It's free. Just go to the website, kninja.net resources, and you'll find the workbook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, please, please, please. And I guess that's it so will we see you next week, Matthew, or you leave on Tuesday?
Most likely not. So I'm leaving. I think I'm going to still be partially in the air or something like that. It's a long flight, man. Like really long.
I wish you a safe trip. Have a great time, and we'll see you when you get back. And have a great week, everyone. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Have a great week.
Cheers.
See you next week.
You too. Talk to you later. Bye.